you so deceived. Often you were warned, you wouldn't take heed. You didn't see the need, negligent indeed. Now your whole garden is full of weed. Devil grass and lots of ants, affecting the lives of all them young plants. But if it's the quality that you want to reap, then lots of interest you have to keep. You must work hard on your garden. Plants need much more than watering. You have to pay special attention to the changes that come with the season and to the soil condition. Cause when you plant potato, you will reap potato. That's what they mean when they say you reap whatever you sow. But you must pick up your fork and hoe, and you must use the right manure. Cause I say you reap whatever you grow. Die, die, yeah.
A blessed good evening, Barbados, and welcome to DLP TV. My name is Quincy Jones, and I will be the host for this evening. We will tackle an issue that affects everyone in our homes, in our family, and every vote: food. Hence, one message that rings louder than most: food comes first. With the rising grocery bills and the empty lunch boxes and the struggling farmers, the question is no longer what's for dinner. It's, can we afford dinner at all? Tonight, we go beyond the headlines to ask, why is food security still a crisis, and what can be done immediately and long term, and to ensure that no citizen goes hungry? Tonight, I'm joined by the very excellent panel here this evening. With me on my right, we have Amoy Gilding-Bourne, the spokesperson for agriculture and the candidate for Christchurch East. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Right. In the middle, Mr. Paul Gibson, the spokesperson for environment and the candidate for St. James Central.
Good evening.
And finally, no stranger to all, Felicia Dujon, the spokesperson on education, the candidate for St. James North.
Good evening. Good evening,
Good
comrades.
evening. And y'all enjoying this? It was a lovely song just now.
Yes,
Yes.
it was.
Yeah.
Right, blasted, man. Back in those days. We have to see how soca and calypso goes this year for crop over. Now, we're here because the system has failed both the consumer and the producer. And prices are up, incomes are stagnant, and there's no comprehensive food policy connecting local farming, distribution, and affordability. And food isn't just an economic issue. It's a health, it's an education, it's an environment, it's a national dignity. So before I begin, I would like to begin with a little icebreaker. So, and anyone can begin. First question for you today. Is hunger in our country a failure of policies or priorities? Is hunger in our country a failure of policies or priorities? Who wants to go first?
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
I would have allowed our spokesperson on agriculture, but if she allows me to go ahead.
Go right on ahead.
Good evening, viewers. And I think it's a very important discussion that we've having, considering the political climate globally at this moment. I believe that one of the ministers spoke about shipment, dealing with our food resources and food security. To your question, I would say both. We have a government that does not understand its priority in terms of serving its people. And of course, in terms of the policies, we've seen the kinds of policies our government, this government has implemented. That is not people focused. It's not people centered. And we've had a minister, perhaps, if I should say so, one of the worst ministers of agriculture that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
We have seen the kinds of policies that he has attempted to implement. We are still hoping that at some point he will give us an account of the funds that have been placed and allocated for our black belly sheep that has been lost in Guyana, if it's still there. We have seen a diverse conversation, and it's not only in agriculture, but in every sector of our society. It includes tourism, it includes our education sector, it includes even agriculture in and of itself, but it touches every facet of our society. So I believe this is a government that does not understand, fully comprehend the role and responsibility, not only of persons that are responsible to govern the society, but how do they implement those programs and those policies that will guide our food security and keep it sustainable in our society. So I think it is both, and we have seen, based upon their record, we have seen that they do not know how to implement, and the policies have continued to fail our citizens in this society.
And to add to that, I think that the policies need to be more domestic based. They need to be more homegrown initiatives. Like Comrade mentioned, the Black Belly Sheep project. They sent over 1,200 black belly sheep down to Guyana. And still we haven't heard from one of the many of the government's consultants, Mr. Leroy McLean, on any data, any empirical data that has been collated or collected so that the inquiring minds can critically analyze that data to see if the project was indeed effective. And if it wasn't effective, well, we need to move on. But the amount of money that was spent doing that Black Belly Sheep project, that money could have been better used for, say, for instance, the Black Belly Sheep artificial insemination project, that we could have boosted the growth of more Black Belly Sheep in Barbados, as opposed to sending them overseas. So I agree with that completely. So a failure of non-sustainable policies and just the government's lack of understanding of how the agricultural industry works and how it connects to the average Joe, food prices, the economy. It's sad. And I agree with Comrade again. We have the worst agricultural minister. He has a failing track record. So yes, I do agree in that regard, in that respect.
Paul Gibson.
Yes, sir. I think that I'm seeing more an issue with policy. But on the other side, Barbadians grow up eating from a lot of Barbadians can find food right from tree, pear tree, eat a mango, whatever. So we kind of we talk about putting a sauce and macaroni pie and so on. So some of us grow up eating in a particular way. But I believe nationally that has pretty much gone away. That type of abundance has gone away, and simply because the policies of this particular government need to be one that causes Barbadians to have more food on their tables, more food in the fridge, more eggs, but not only more eggs, but you should have a policy regarding the pricing of foods. Right now, everybody's saying we have a lot of NCDs in Barbados, non-communicable diseases. But they don't realize that is associated with poor eating. And people tend to go to poor foods when they can't afford the almonds and the grapes and the things that really keep us healthy, the ground provision, and so on. Because when you get sweet potato and yam costing the same as English potatoes and so on, it's kind of out of whack. So whoever governs the ship has to set policies in place that would allow us to be a food secure environment in Barbados.
Okay, so next icebreaker. I come in. All right. So this one, y'all listening? What is one food item you had to cut back on lately, and why? What's the one food item you had to cut back on lately, and why?
I used to love almonds, and I had to.
You had to cut that.
The price went from $24 to $42 or something.
Same thing with cashews.
Whoa,
It's ridiculous.
so you're a cashew.
I like her.
I was going to ask you the question whether it's voluntary or involuntary, because we went through a crisis where we had no milk, where there was another crisis where we had no chicken,
Shortage of eggs.
and even eggs. And we as a society, we had to compromise in certain cases. We had to substitute what we had. We had other brands coming from other societies, from other countries, to make up for what was happening. So we have to take in consideration. And when I spoke about the priorities, this is the kind of priority I'm discussing in terms of the government. What is a priority in terms of subsidizing our local farmers? Because we shouldn't get to the point where our government or our farmers, our local farmers, have to be begging government to provide some kind of assistance and intervention. And I think that is important. We went through a crisis, a chicken crisis, and I don't know how many of us remember that, where there was no chicken on the shelves. And you could imagine, as a mother, most parents, what we tend to do, chicken seems to be most of the cheapest, protein. So most persons would go ahead and buy a chicken that would last you a couple of days for your children. And persons had to start looking for fish. And we know the fish crisis, the fisheries had a crisis through the same government, again, through the policies. Because remember what happened during Hurricane Barrel, how the fisher folks lost, the ships were damaged. So we had a food crisis, not only in poultry, but also the fisheries department. And that wasn't too long ago. So when we had to cut back, it's not that we wanted to cut back. We had no choice with those kind of commodities, which are very important for the sustainability and nutritious for the family. So I think when families look back and see what they have gone through, I don't think very much what Comrade said here, that we grew up in Barbados having certain amenities and certain supplies. And when you go for a crisis, you go to a supermarket and there's absolutely no chicken, no milk, no eggs for weeks. It tells you something about the priorities of the government and how are they sustaining and how they are doing any kind of intervention on behalf of the farmers. So sometimes you don't have a choice. We just have to take what is available. And it becomes even worrisome when you have families that really cannot afford any other type or any other alternative to what they have. So these are the realities that it's currently existing. And I think that's something that we really need to highlight.
I have a question on the board from Mr. Kenny Betts. He said, we talk about the national nutrition policy, yet the government is not producing food locally to support that policy. Do you believe that?
And thank you for the question. And I'm very glad that that matter has been brought up, because it's a national nutrition policy that should have encompassed all schools as well, and also to all citizens. What I have seen and observed in the school environment is that that policy should have guided the school meals menu. And recently, I think I have made a couple of observations, and I believe that the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Education Transformation need to look deeply and revisit the education, particularly the menu for the school meals. Because if we are saying that our children need to have certain types of nutritious values and intake for the day, I think it's important that they, who also pass the policy, should look at what the menu look like. And I have seen what it looks
and
like.
Taste the food too.
And parents have complained, principals and teachers have complained, but
Students.
no one has taken the opportunity to look at the menu, what the children are taking. Because I remember when the policy was rolled out, parents were given a specialized list of what the child's supposed to have in school. They also demanded from vendors of certain items that they were able to sell and outside of the school premises. But at the same time, you're seeing the school in itself of feeding children foods that are not nutritious. That is not under policy itself. So there seems to be a disconnection between what the government is saying and what is actually being done. And I think that's something that we really need to look at. So what I can say about the school meals program, I would hope that at one point I can visit the facility. I have made recommendations for the school nutrition. I believe that every Barbadian child should have a warm or hot meal. There are children, these are the only meals that they have for the day. And it's interesting, I went to a primary school today and I saw that they have the macaroni and cheese, and they had, and I think it's great because in the macaroni and cheese they had pumpkin. You can see the grated pumpkin, which is very healthy. And they had a banana. And I heard a little boy say, well, can I have your banana? So it tells me that the children, the intake it's not even sufficient for them. And I think there's so much more we can do for our children, our Barbadian children, when it comes to school meals.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with respect to agriculture, if you're going to marry the two, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, I think that every primary school should have an agricultural program. It should be part of the syllabus. And with respect to school meals, if we really have something that is working like that, then we can help supply nutritional foods to the school meals to supplement or cut down on importation of foods and stuff, to do this stuff. But if you have each primary school, and we can carry on to secondary school as well, that are growing their own melons, growing their own squash, spinach, and they're able to utilize that to assist with the school meals, then they would feel even more proud to see that they're growing what they're eating.
I agree, because it start to connect.
Yeah.
Because then you have the garden going to the kitchen going to the students, and the students will feel more pride, and they will say, oh, that's making very good.
Yes, yes, and also it would help change the narrative or the trajectory for agriculture, because agriculture is a ministry that is not as sexy as the others, just to put it that way. And to attract, oh well, definitely to attract the younger generation, to seduce the younger generation, to change the negative stigma attached to agriculture, where they say, young people aren't interested in agriculture, what's not. If we get into the primary schools, from an early age, teach them, show them, plant the seeds in their head, make them feel proud about working the land. And then for parents like myself, who I am a registered farmer, who have children, encourage your children on the farm. Encourage your children to come into the sheep pen, take out the sheep, learn about the chickens, learn how to, I don't know, irrigate or all of those things. Just do it from small, and it will get easier, and it will change. But right now we don't have any. Well, I can say we don't have any. I stand corrected, but there are not many primary schools that have an agricultural program or a farming program, right? And that is something I think that should be made mandatory for every primary school, secondary school as well.
Okay, Paul, we have to say about this discussion.
I was observing over the last couple of weeks that Guyana was awarded worldwide as the only country in the world that can self-sufficient in its food security. And it was all over the place, and they were celebrating that. Now that comes with a level of intentionality. You don't just wake up and get become food secure and take the world record, gold medal.
Yeah.
But it means that someone was looking at the legumes. You said that agriculture is not sexy, Amoy, but really and truly, when you have animals, you have the you're raising birds, you have the sheep, you have the legumes, you have sugarcane, you have so many different food groups, fruits
and species
species as well. The
Sweet
grapes
potatoes,
and raspberries and so on. So if you, from 33,000 feet, are looking down on your agricultural process and you're seeing gaps based on what your nationals are consuming, it really is that somebody should stop and say, look, well, this is the gap that we need to fill. This is the gap we need to fill. And right now, we are borrowing a lot of money, which has to be paid back, of course. But the point being is that if we can lower our import food bill by growing our own stuff, and this is why I'm very concerned, and I know this will probably come later in the program. A lot of our good agricultural land is being converted to housing. Now, housing is necessary, but they're choosing the best agricultural land with water supply and so on, and putting houses on it. So we're going backwards. We're really going in the reverse direction when it comes to food security.
Yeah, I agree. I think a balance definitely needs to be struck. Excuse me. And point blank, the government needs to stop marginalizing agricultural lands. They need to stop using our agricultural lands for housing and other non-agricultural projects. I've said it again, and it's worth saying a million times until they get it through their heads. Everywhere you go, you turn, you see once they were used to grow sugarcane or they used to grow potatoes or yams or whatever the case may be, is now in housing. And then we hear the government make promises, like Minister Wilfred Abrams was talking about Dodds, how in 18 months Dodds is going to be able to grow enough food to be self-sufficient, and it's going to be able to grow enough food to feed the defense force, to feed the geriatric hospital, to feed school meals. Where is this food being grown? If they're taking up all the land that was opposite the prison,
So, yes,
that
yes.
was, traditionally used for prison
growth.
growth, that's gone. That's turned into housing. The land on Waterford, that's now for the the botanical gardens. That's not a botanical gardens. That's down there. That's taken. The reservoir that they had out behind the prison, they've now filled that in. So the prison had water to, use for irrigation
But
purposes.
why would they fill in a reservoir?
I have no idea.
In the last 7 years that happened, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
So my question is, how is he making these bold statements when we can clearly see there's no land to grow the amount of food that he is talking about on? Where is it going?
I think that a Democratic Labour Party government would certainly approach agriculture very, very differently in terms of.
Oh, for sure,
And
for sure,
we've
for sure.
always been ahead of the game in respect to agriculture. Really, ones that had the negotiations regarding the new sugar plantations and so on, and how it should go. And I find that all of the work that we've put in to keep Barbados ahead of the game, for some reasons, people not realizing, but they are really dropping the ball in agriculture. And we had it going in the right direction. We had agriculture going in the right direction.
I see a lot of use across you again, but I see a lot of use for agricultural lands. They're using it, and they're talking about the Center for Food Security, and that's at Duke St. Thomas. Sprawling facility that hasn't been used up to this stage. 38 acres of arable land they took up to do that. And then you hear them building another place now. They're building also to aid with food security in St. Lucie. Then they're building something else. What? And they're using up the agricultural land. So it really needs to stop. And I don't know how, or rather in the past, well, from my research, they used to have zoning. So agricultural zones were agricultural zones. Water zones were water zones. You could not build on that land. But now it seems to be so easy. People are being able to convert agricultural land so that they can use for commercial purposes, as in buildings, housing. So I think something needs to be seriously looked at that to see how easy it is for that to be done and to stop it.
Well, I think the other thing about that is that we have a minister responsible for agriculture that does not take those matters seriously. He only tends to be more reactive than anything else. So if there's some kind of debate on the issue, then you'd hear him coming out and saying, well, we planning to this and we're hoping to do that. So all of that should have been in policy so that they can have mechanisms to control what people do, the land usage in the country. The other factor of that is that the emphasis that we play when it comes to the educational part of agriculture. There are programs at the Polytechnic. So there's a diploma program in agriculture, and the students
Barbados Community College has one
they
too,
do that. And it was kind of interesting that we were talking about food first, and we were saying that we have a climate school, but we don't have an agricultural school, which is so much more important.
The Democratic Labour Party had an agricultural school project that they had set up, which the Barbados Labour Party has just left. I think it was at Paragon, and they have not done anything with it.
Well, I think these are the kinds of concerns that we need to raise when we look at in terms of how agriculture is treated, not as a science in and of itself, but something that everyone can participate in, because we all need to eat. Food is part of our livelihood. Food is it's innate that you as a human being, this is what you need. But the priority seems very, very diverse. They don't seem to have an interest. We can almost imagine what the budget allocation is for agriculture and where is it exactly being spent, because we do not get an account of it. When we have the debates in Parliament, we do not hear much from the minister. He's really there to attack our spokesperson on agriculture. And what we really need is we need to have a responsible government. And I think only through the Democratic Labour Party we will see that. We have seen the work of the Democratic Labour Party helping farmers and helping not only large-scale farmers, but small farmers. And I think in every constituency, there's always small pockets of local farmers. Even in St. James North, I came across a number of small farmers that just really serve the community, whether it's through cucumbers or doing some bananas and things of that nature. And I think we really have to look at within each constituency how we can assist, because the government is not giving the kind of intervention. Most farmers, what you tend to hear is that the government gives you a rebate, but you need to pay for whatever that you have. So if we do have young persons interested in agriculture, if they do not have the seed funding, if they do not have that, and we hear that quite a lot, how do we provide funding to our young persons? Agriculture is very expensive. It's a very expensive, as much as may not be sexy, it's very expensive to sustain. If you do not have the equipment, if you do not have the funding, this is why you find a lot of persons enter the field and they can't sustain it because of the funding allocations. And then you have to find a market, which is some of the things and concerns, the issues that the government really needs to look into. And I think the Prime Minister may have not looked seriously into what the Minister of Agriculture is doing. He seems to be working entirely on his own, separate from the government.
Very ad hoc.
And I think that's something that is
sure.
It's fairly new, that a lot of farmers, we're hearing the complaints, but we're not seeing much has been done, and millions of dollars has been spread in that ministry, most likely wasted because we're not seeing the output of it. And we have, and I think I wanted to highlight that issue. If you look at the Ministry of Agriculture right now, officers, some persons retired and they're not replaced. So they're also understaffed in the ministry. So usually you would have an officer attached to every farmer or every constituency. Now, if the person retires, nobody is allocated. So you have that kind of deficiency in terms of manpower, because those persons would come around and give the technical expertise and advise farmers, okay, this is what I'd like you to do. This is if you need different species of potatoes. And these are things that I learned as a farmer myself, that I think it's almost 16 varieties of sweet potatoes. And these are the things that they teach you about. They train you, they give you different types of training. So this is something that would want to do to appeal to the government to look into the ministry and ensure that they have adequate staff, ensure that they're being paid well, so that they can, be more productive in the environment that they're in.
I have a statement here that was said by some students that said that Barbados has long been seen as a paradise, but a paradise doesn't mean everyone is eating well.
Okay.
Rising food prices, climate pressures, and global supply chain issues have hit us hard. The cost of imported goods continues to climb. According to the recent figures from the Ministry of Agriculture, nearly 80% of our food is still imported. That makes us vulnerable to storms, vulnerable to inflation, and vulnerable to foreign markets that we can't control. That's done by a student. And he's writing on an essay on agriculture.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
So I really, Felicia made a good point just now, and Amoy brought attention to this. About this whole thing of policy. The Democratic Party did a tremendous job in agriculture when we were there. A lot of the people that we worked with as a government are still there. The technocrats, the experts, the vets, the agricultural specialists, the people involved in seeds and seed selection and all this. They're there. A lot of those break minds are there. They have a fantastic PS as far as I'm concerned in agriculture. Now, my concern is, I wonder if the minister listens to his technocrats. I don't think he's listening. I really don't believe he's, because if he was listening, the central bank report would not be showing this negative slide in agriculture in the central bank report. No, this is not our report. This is what Kevin Greenidge and his team identified, that one of the areas that we are decreasing in is agriculture. I want to add as well that we try to go into the, I don't know if you get to this part, but we try to go into the marijuana industry under agriculture.
Definitely go good.
Okay. Right, but that again is a sign that somebody for the last 7 years has not been listening, because they issued permits to grow marijuana. People grew marijuana, people reaped marijuana, put it into a container, and realized that, oh my goodness, we have absolutely no banking policy in place for a marijuana industry.
But they didn't wait until they did all that. They knew from the get-go. They knew from the get-go. So
Madness.
I call it the medicinal cannabis. I think a lady said it. The great deception.
Great.
Because
I love that.
from the first get-go, now Barbados was late to the game. Jamaica, front runner. St. Vincent, another front runner. Antigua and Barbuda. Let me hear St. Lucia. All of those territories have the same issue with respect to this or lack of support from the banking sector and the insurance sector as well too.
Correct.
But we recently saw the president of the Barbados Banking Association. I think his name is Shimon McIntyre. I stand corrected, but I think his name is Shimon McIntyre. And he says the banks haven't moved. They haven't changed their position with respect to handling or honoring transactions begotten from proceeds from the sale of marijuana, the sale of medicinal cannabis, whichever term you feel more comfortable in using. They have not moved. Now, I remember it was last year at the Beige Can conference. I attended the conference at Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center. And I saw and heard and watched Shanika Roberts-Odell, and she's the CEO of Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, and Wilfred Abrams, who was then acting as the Minister of Agriculture. He acted in that capacity for about 2 minutes. He got up on the stage, so did she, and they skirted around the issue, willfully skirted around the issue. There was a lot of pomp and pageantry, but they weren't dealing with that specific issue, which is essentially the end all or more all than, without the banking sector, it's going to really be hard to move money. So it begs the question. We see Island Therapeutics open their dispensary. Who they bank it with?
You put it under the bed.
They got it in a shoebox, store somewhere. How are they moving money? These
are some hard questions that must be answered.
Yeah.
I mean, federally, Canada, United States, they say no. So obviously there have to be some other mechanism being purported by the government. But we don't know. Barbadians don't know what it is.
Well, to answer that question, at the same Beige Can Medicinal Cannabis Conference last year, the government signed 3 MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding. Was a Memorandum of Understanding? Exactly just that, an understanding. And they signed it with, I think it was a company, Money, which is a digital platform to facilitate movement of money digitally. We haven't heard anything about that. We haven't heard whether, it may be running outside of Barbados, but within the context of Barbados and the banking industry reference to medicinal cannabis, we haven't heard the Barbados Medicinal Licensing Authority say anything about that. We haven't heard that application or that program is on track and Barbadians can use it, download it. I don't know how, nothing. Then they signed another MOU, I think it was with Barbados Export or Export Barbados. What are we exporting and to where? And if that is the case, and we have cultivated a marijuana crop and we have exported it, what money did we get from doing so?
Oh, is it legal?
What is the status of doing that? That too.
Well, I think
so,
we have legislation in place.
Right. You have the Cannabis Act.
Cannabis Act. Right, and so, and you have to get permits for every section of that. If you're getting seeds, planting, reaping, moving it, if you have a vehicle, you can't have a vehicle transporting cannabis without a permit. So the government making money. The government is the intention of the government to make money.
Well, they have made money because a license is upward of $29,000. And they boasted that they sold upward of 30 licenses. So I don't know, you do the math.
Millions per year just without making any money. Millions.
Yeah.
So they're making these
25 plus
$1
million.
million that they spent, you know,
And we still don't know
we
how
don't have
exactly it
anything
was
to
spent.
show for it, you know. I was actually going to suggest that the Prime Minister, as opposed to giving her donation from Saudi Arabia to culture, she really should be giving it to food. Barbadians need to eat. Barbadians, there are a lot of Barbadians right now that are not eating properly. Back to your question, what do you have to give up, you know?
And we are realizing that the import bill is getting higher, and it's at least 80%. Before I go to that, I'll go straight to the screen. Tim Ward said for Colorado, one of the first states in the United States, dealt with the medical weed and still cannot use the banks and have to deal in cash.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And that creates a security risk
Mhm.
for Island Therapeutics, if that's the case, and that's what's going on in there. I'm not saying that, but it still begs the question, how are they doing their transactions? Where are they banking? And we heard the same Mr. McIntyre, the president of the Barbados Banking Association, say that as far as he knows, and he should know whether or not, there's no discussion on board about how they are going to counteract, move around, you know, jump over, all within the context of legal, you know, legal context. And I mean, the banks in Barbados and in the Caribbean do not operate in a vacuum. They depend on international banking to process transactions. And the banking sector is not going to risk losing that type of relationship. I mean, with international banks and so forth.
Knew this.
They all knew this since 2019. So it was very disingenuous. It is very disingenuous. And I don't know if anybody realized, but when I saw the video that came out when the Island Therapeutics opened and stuff, I didn't see anybody from the Rastafarian community there. I may say a Rasta, but they weren't from the Rastafarian community that was at the Beige Can conference, that was given promises, and, you know, they asked certain types of questions and so forth. They were sidelined. We saw them in the nation afterwards making a statement about how they were sidelined and so forth. And, you know, I think it is very disingenuous.
I think the minister has
Very
failed the
disingenuous.
Rastafarian community in Barbados. They've been trying from the beginning. They were at the settings before they even introduced the bill. I was at that bill I presented on the behalf of the Barbados Pharmaceutical Society. We had to struggle very hard to make sure that there wasn't a wild west for marijuana, and this is why we sequestered its use to medical only, under prescription and with dispensing. And so the pharmacists, as professionals, have made sure that they put the boundaries around that whole area of the medical marijuana. And we're not talking about, we've been talking about the tinctures, the rubs, the drops. As of 2025, they've introduced under the Ministry of Agriculture, I know we're talking agriculture tonight, they've introduced the marijuana dispensary. Now, it's believed that the strains that are going to be used here are not imported, but all grown here. And they're supposed to be vaped at the dispensary itself. Right? Now,
but they have the option to.
Right. If the doctor prescribes, let's say 100 grams of marijuana, and you're hearing this tonight on DLP TV, right? The person can either use it vape, right, which is heating it and inhaling it,
Right.
or if they can leave the facility and take it home. Now, this is where it gets a little funny. The persons could either boil it as tea, smoke it. Unfortunately, control is lost of the use of that marijuana once you leave
that
the
door.
space.
But can I ask a question? Would it still be legal for them to transport it? I mean, from the pharmacy to the house?
Well,
That's
there's
a
a
lot.
As long as they have their card.
There's a card that you have.
I think that is the conversation that we've had. We've had a Ministry of Agriculture that have had different types of programs to help to sustain food security in Barbados. And I remember there was a time we did something with cassava. They had this big boom of cassava flour. We would have grown so much cassava that we would not have to import any kind of flour or anything of that nature. Then we looked at breadfruit for us to do the flour out of breadfruit, and we don't hear anything. It seems, as I said before, that now we're hearing about the medicinal cannabis, and we want to know how long that will last, because there's always some new and brilliant idea, and there's no sustainability towards that. So the question that we have to ask as citizens is, what are the priorities, as I said before, and as we started off, what are the priorities of the country? What is the priority of the government to ensure that every citizen has access to nutritious food? So when we speak about our high input bills, we should not be in a position where we still ordering or importing carrots from other societies.
Oh, we import a lot of things we shouldn't be importing.
You know, we're in a society where it seems very minute, but at the same time, we're thinking, you go to a supermarket and you're seeing carrots that can, all these kinds of produce that can be produced locally. Why isn't it the government not implementing or providing the kind of intervention that our farmers will be able to diversify with the crop produce? When we look at it in terms of, we have an institute that is responsible for tissue culture. What is happening there? We want, now you're talking about digital agriculture, which is supposed to be something that is revolutionary in agriculture in terms of how we produce our various crops. And all of that, I think, is very important. The responsibility of the government in terms of how it provides that kind of guidance in those fields, because yes, the farmers, we can produce to a certain extent, but if the farmers do not have the resources, if they do not have the kinds of intervention, if they do not have the funding necessary, and I think one of the reasons why we have, and we will continue to have that conversation, many countries subsidize their farmers. And that's why it's become cheaper to export it as opposed to us. And I think these are the kinds of conversations that we really need to have. Yes, I understand that we need to speak about medicinal marijuana, but if we can't eat, we can't use those.
And also too, are they using the agricultural lands to grow this marijuana that we can't sell, or we can't, you know, move the money as to, are we taking food out of our mouths to, you know, to promote an industry which really is not going anywhere anytime soon?
Okay. Tim Ward said on the screen that born in 1959, Bath Plantation was the breadbasket of growing food in St. John. And most of the land is now in bush. Now we can see that there's a lot of land now. The land that we have now, not taken up by the housing development, is now being used as a little sighting for monkeys, that's relaxing. It is not being used for the right purpose. I'm starting to see hardy sugarcane plants growing, or the cotton growing. What can we do to help save now, if we were in government right now, the land that we have existing right now?
Stop using it for housing. Period. Stop it. I mean, as Comrade said, housing is important, but it should not be at the detriment of our agricultural industry, how we feed ourselves. Burnham in Guyana years ago told his people, produce or perish. And I will repeat that. We need to produce or we will perish. Right now, we import 1.4 million kilograms of lamb from New Zealand. No, I like lamb real bad.
You like lamb?
I love it.
Oh, okay.
But we should not be importing that amount of lamb. When we have our Barbadian black-belly sheep, we should be using the money, using the initiatives to let home drums beat first. Yes, because the Barbados government has sold the patent to our black-belly sheep DNA, and we have not seen any benefits from this project.
Did we even secure the patent? I don't know if you say we sold. I don't know if we got a chance to secure it, but I think that we are at a very, very interesting point in this country right now. I want to go back to the fact that under a democratic Labour Party government, we tend to do things very, very differently. Now, apart from having a lot of professionals in this party, we have engineers, we have lawyers, we have pharmacists, we have doctors, and so on. We always bring a cadre of of candidates to the table that can sit down around the table and look at Barbados and say, okay, let's have a conversation around agriculture, right? And I'm telling you that the solutions that can come out of a DLP, and we have some very good ideas for DLP for agriculture.
Yeah,
You
some
know,
of which we need to keep close.
Keep close, I mean,
But
keep close because
because
they
you
have
know,
the ministry, you know, and they're not doing it. As a matter of fact, if the government gives the DLP agriculture to run right now,
we would do a better
do a
job.
much better job. It would go to the roof. I can assure you that. I mean, Mayor Motley, please fire in that way. Feel free and give it. That's how, you know, I'll tell you, because seriously, we are joking around and no, we're dropping the ball and no one is having the big conversation as to why are we not planting food. And because science is measurement. You know, I'm a scientist, all right? We measure. You can measure whether you're having potatoes and what quantum of potatoes you have. You can measure how many sheep, how many lambs. You can measure the cow, the volume of milk. These are things that they are measurable and quantifiable things. But obviously, Indara is coming to Barbadians, making a lot of promises, very Machiavellian, making a lot of promises. And then the other thing he says a lot too is, we are going to
build out.
We're going to build out.
Add
on.
Mm.
And you know, and they're going to send all these containers of potatoes outside of Barbados. And when you stop and ask yourself, but you wait, boss, when you growing these potatoes to put in the container, where you growing them, by the way, can we see where they are? Do not exist.
So we are not going to tonight.
We are not going to.
For sure.
You know. So.
Another issue have been about the price. One supermarket has one price, another supermarket has another price. The vendors in the neighborhood, different price. How can we control the price of our food items so that the normal person can at least survive in this climate?
Well, it all depends on what kinds of foods we look at, because there are times where we have a very large quantity of sweet potatoes. There's a period of time we get lots of sweet potatoes, so the prices drop. Yam season, you know, yam is usually $4 a pound. And when it becomes very scarce, then you know the prices will go up. So I think what is very important, and I'm glad that Comrade spoke about in terms of measurement and data. And this is something that has failed this government tremendously, that they do not use data. They do not use scientific data to guide the policies. So if we know, and we've been looking at the data, we've been going to our consumers, and I believe that we have a unit that's responsible for consumers. We also have a nonprofit that deals with consumers as well, and see what consumers are saying, and look at the data, see what farmers themselves are saying about crop production or even husbandry, whatever that it is, livestock. What are some of the concerns that they have? How much financial intervention that they would need? How would they be subsidized? Because it's very important when we think about agriculture in and of itself. We say that agriculture is the science of cultivating the soil, but there's so much more that is happening, because then you have to look at the equipment. It's very costly to buy a tractor. And some farmers that cannot afford have to wait perhaps for 1 or 2 tractors that the ministry owns to do the plowing,
to get around to them. And these are very serious issues, you know, that the minister responsible for agriculture have not had the decency to say, okay, let's get at least 3 more tractors for our farmers. And these are the kinds of data that we need, the statistics, the scientific, and I think empirical investigations of what is happening on the ground. Not what the minister is saying. He seems like I heard a story that he's more into travel agency. So maybe that's why he thinks that way, because he's always very airy about things and not looking at what is happening on the ground. Because what is happening on the ground, when you have 10 farmers in one location that have to wait on 1 tractor to do the plowing for them and then come back perhaps to swipe for them. All of those kinds of matters that we really seriously have to consider, because it's not just getting the sweet potatoes. There is a process that takes place. And sometimes the process is hindered because they do not have the equipment. They do not have the types of expertise to come in and give them the advice.
advisement of what is happening. We also have to look at the weather patterns.
Mhm.
We have more rainy seasons. Like right now, we're in the rainy period. So farmers have to look at in terms of the sweet potatoes, if it will go bad. If it rains too much, you know, your
Yeah.
sweet potatoes, that's it, it's over.
Mhm.
Your pumpkins. So
Mhm.
during the rainy season, it's a very difficult and challenging times for farmers. So perhaps we have to do perhaps the circulations of what we produce and how quickly we can do that, because we have the short-term crops. So we have sweet potatoes, sweet peppers,
Mhm.
corn, whatever that it is. But I think one of the most important aspect that we do not speak about in Barbados is pests, like the monkeys.
Well, to add on,
So I will want to, and I remember the same minister telling persons, well, you know, bring the monkeys, you'll get some money for it. But the monkeys are driving the farmers. They're really a hindrance to production as well. And I think it's a deterrent for farmers to see that you invest so much. You're not going to get the rebate from the government if you don't have crops. If the government, the officers come by, the agricultural officers come by, and they do not see your sweet potatoes because the monkeys ripped all of them out, you do not get the rebate. And so all of those kinds of, I think, experiences, the experiences of the farmers, the empirical data, and the minister needs to know. So when you ask the question, what can we do? The first thing I would probably do is to get rid of him and allow him to run the agency that he has, because he doesn't seem to have a connection.
What agency is that?
Flying.
Okay.
So I think what we really need to focus on those aspects. What is happening on the ground, and what the Farmers Association, what are they saying? What are the challenges that they're having? We have concerns about irrigation. We have concerns about the water supply. The government has still not seen the need to give farmers a different rate. What the rate that they have, it's not that different from personal,
household use.
from household use. And I think if we had a minister that is responsible enough, that is sensitive to the needs of farmers, I think a lot more would have been better in this country when it comes to agriculture.
And just to add on to what you're saying, that the minister doesn't listen or doesn't have his ears on the ground. And the one or very few occasions when he may listen to what the farmers are saying, it goes through one ear and comes out the next. Why I say that? We have a ground up Spencer's. He visited Spencer's. The farmers told him what was going on. This is Spencer's up by the airport, opposite the ground, opposite the airport, where the Concorde is, or was rather. And monkeys was one of the major issues that they were having, other than lack of access to water. They gave us water tanks, but a lot of the farmers are having issues with getting the water into the tanks. The size of the main the pipeline coming from the main is one thing. But with respect to what Comrade Dujon was saying about the monkeys, and he talked big, we're going to have a monkey catching unit and call this man and give them this number and you this and that he's going to have some people come in and clear down the bush that was on the back part that we could also use for agriculture. Since then, there's been nothing. There's been nothing. And the monkeys are still terrorizing the farmers. And, you know, the farmers' complaints are on deaf ears,
but there
basically.
are as many monkeys as there are children in this country. If you think of it,
or more,
and the numbers get very, very, very large, like early in the year, because that's like the breeding season. Then all the fruits start to come in when it starts to rain again, and they begin to multiply. And as much food as our Barbadian children can consume, monkeys will take away all the sugar apples, all the mangoes, the plums.
And they're spiteful too, you know. They're going to bite the melon and throw it one side.
It's like that they're moving.
Bite another one and throw it one side.
Once a time though, they used to say that they see female, they would come towards me and see male, they would run.
Yeah.
I don't find them that they're not moving at all.
No, they're not running. They're not running.
Yeah. But I'm all for culling monkeys. I mean, you have to, again, it's science. What monkey population is considered to be adequate that would fit into the disappearing forests that we keep cutting down and destroying, because that's the reason why we're seeing them in our yards, because where they're accustomed habitating, that's being destroyed. So we have to say, okay, what quantum of monkeys are we willing to accept, and then cull down to that, and knowing that they will all come back, because be honest with you, there's going to come a time when it will have to be done. And
I would like to think that we have some humane practices for dealing with the monkeys, but that's just my opinion. In the past, in the past they used to pay them for the tails. But I'd like to have some sort of humane process,
Of course,
for them to get rid of the monkeys. But I mean, some of the farmers use newspaper and different kind of techniques to be able to scare them or whatever the case may be. But having promises from the minister saying yes, he's going to address it. Yes, you can call this monkey catching team, and every time you call the number, there's nobody answering the phone. Again, it's disingenuous.
I always say, feed my children and let the monkeys sort themselves out. We can't have monkeys at the expense of humans being able to eat. So it's kind of one of those debates. But I'm an animal lover, by the way. But there comes a time when you have to know. Well, the way how nature runs is that there are always counteracting forces that keeps animals and birds and so on in balance. And unfortunately, there's nothing to keep a monkey in balance. There's really nothing.
No, but we haven't done. What I'm saying is that the ministry or the minister, through the minister, has not done the research, because I'm quite sure there are other societies that have to deal with similar circumstances and situations, and
Catch them and send it for research overseas.
Well, as I said before, I'm going to try to be as ethical as possible when it comes to animal rights, because I think we also have to remember we're actually going into their territories most times. And what is very interesting, and I think, Comrade, you said something about that we used to have various areas that dealt with agriculture specifically.
Yeah, zoning.
And with the zoning aspect of it. And now when you drive across the country, you're seeing vast amount of land
for housing.
And I think that's where the conversation have to be looked into. So we have to have a collaboration of Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Commerce, and even Education, to see what are the needs of the country and how best that we can, fulfill those needs and keep it sustainable. We have had different types of agreements with different organizations like ICA. ICA has done tremendous work in terms of providing technical skills and funding for a number of programs in Barbados and other Caribbean islands as well. And what I have seen over the years, that we don't use the data that is being done. We use the resources, we use the funding, the technical skills, and once the program is over, then everything shuts down, everybody takes their bag, everybody leaves. And I think these are the kinds of areas that we need to look at. So if we are to have an agricultural sector that is on that base, that looks forward to the future, how to get young persons involved, is that we have to look at what not only attracts them, but how sustainable that could be. I noticed that there was a comment from someone speaking about rainwater harvesting. And I think water harvesting is very important in terms of how we provide irrigation for our societies. But again, it's very important that when we think about the agricultural sector, just keep in mind that many farmers do not have that immediate financing to provide that kind of intervention for their own farms. So even if they want irrigation, they may not be able to afford it upright. So they may have to get some kind of loans. And that's where the banking sector comes in terms of how much funding do they provide to farmers. Are there any kind of cooperations? And I believe that there are kinds of conversations on that as well. But there are times farmers do need the kind of financial intervention that is needed. So water harvesting is important, but again, you need the finances to deal with that, to work on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I would say now, another student said that agriculture is not just a social issue, it's a political one. Where is the urgency in Parliament? Where is the long-term national food strategy? Government promises support for local agriculture, but what actually is being delivered? We need serious investment in sustainable farming, modern technology for crop resistance,
Mm-hmm.
and better access to water and land for small farmers, especially our young people.
A plus.
A plus.
Yes.
Yes.
Now the students are doing well.
Yes. Very well. Very well.
We got good handshake.
Yes. Yes.
So the question came is, what about the school meal program in a country of our size, and every child should have access to a hot, nutritious meal
Yeah.
without the bureaucracy or the stigma?
Yeah. We've talked about that earlier.
We talked about
Comrade
it, yes.
Felicia talked about
And
the hot
what
meal.
is so interesting is that in secondary schools now, school meals is now in the schools.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the lines are getting longer.
Because, and I think that I would like to really appeal to the minister responsible for education transformation to look into the school meals program. It's very important. I have seen a number of young persons, because what we started off with at primary school, but we're seeing there's a crisis as well in secondary school. So as much as we can say that, you know, parents can afford, we know what the economic crisis that we're living in right now. And I believe that if we can provide that support for our students, so not only that we want to ensure that our students do well academically, but we want to ensure that they're healthy, so they have healthy minds and bodies to learn and to adapt to the environment. And of course, most importantly, we need a revision of the school meals policy. We need a revision of the menu itself. I do not want to go in a school on Monday or Tuesday and see children eating some had something party or whatever. That is not something that we would not. And I've always made the analogy when I go to Parliament and I see what the parliamentarians eat,
Mm-hmm.
the ministers eat, and what our children are eating. And imagine that we're the taxpayers, and this is what our ministers are eating, and our children cannot have. So we
Yeah.
would like the same persons that cook and prepare meals for the ministers to do the same for our children. I would like to go to schools where I feel content, where I can see a child's meal. Okay, well, this is what a Barbadian child is eating today, and that child will be sustained for the
With
day.
the food groups,
Some kind of
vegetables,
sustenance.
fruit.
You cannot tell me that this is what you're going to give. What I saw, I went to a school not too long ago, and what I saw, it broke my heart. I didn't even want to leave the school, because I know this is not something I'd want to feed anyone. And I think it's not only what the school meals, and I think the school meals program in itself may have challenges. Maybe they're not receiving the type of financial intervention that is needed. Maybe perhaps we need to allocate more funding to the school meals program so that the children can get the kinds of meals that is required for them. But I think there's so much more that could be done. We tend to focus quite a lot on the academics and how our children are doing. But if the children are hungry in schools, we'll see the side effects of that.
What I'm very interested in, we're trying to tell students, and I don't know if I'm wrong in this situation. We're telling students that they must eat healthy. We're telling students that they have a nutrition policy. I'm not seeing it passed down to none of the ministries. I know that every ministry has a canteen. And I really want to sell something to a child. I think that it needs to be a holistic buy-in, that all government ministries are part of this healthy lifestyle. That every ministry that has a canteen has to buy into the national nutrition policy. I think that's the first step that will make children want to get involved, because daddy and mommy got to go work, and daddy and mommy has to do the same thing. And to me, it's not being handled well. But I think if we want to get it work well, a buy-in must not only come from just the schools, but the buy-in must come from all the ministries, even right down to Parliament.
Yes.
I'll tell you something. We're talking about school meals and the lines getting longer. When I was a boy, I don't know about y'all, but when
we're not a boy.
when I was a boy, still a boy. we had school meals, and it was nothing to be ashamed of to stand in the line and have school meals. You started with milk and biscuits, and I don't know if anybody remembers that. And then you had a sumptuous meal. I remember one day the pork piece was so big that I almost choked on it. It was well, the servings were rich and nice, you know, and it was really, really a nice thing. But I'm comparing then and now. Now, when a child comes to school, they have school meals. When a child leaves home, many of them have nothing to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Even to be able to afford flour to buy make bakes. Bakes was the bread if you don't have thing. And then they go to school, they eat, and then they come home in the evening, and there's no food until school meals the following day. That is the reality of a lot of Barbadians. And I'll tell you something else. The sooner I hear people purporting and pushing this whole thing of put octagonal labels on our food, put these labels on our food so that people can eat properly and so on. I do not have a problem with octagonal labels except that it would send the cost of food up. But more specifically, it is time for this government to remove some of the taxes off of food in Barbados. It is the food needs to become more affordable. Since you're increasing gas and increasing insurance and increasing this and increasing that, maybe it is time to lower the costs and taxes on significant foods. And I'm not talking about just foods. I'm talking about foods that would enrich bodies and make children healthy. You know, so they're strong and can run around and so on. It's something that it is time. It is about that time. It is time to do it. It really is.
And I do agree with you, comrade. And perhaps one of the issues that we need to look at is, and we did speak about pricing, going to different supermarkets and seeing different prices on that as well. But it also comes to the question of the DLP's work when it comes to the school meals program, the implementation of the school program, and how it has deteriorated over the period of time, especially under this government. Because there you're talking about having that scrumptious meal, that nutritious meal, to what we have now. The comparison is not the same. And what is even more alarming is that I can almost imagine what was the budget allocation at the period of time to what we have now. The millions of dollars, the millions of dollars that is being spent in the school meals program, and what the children, the output, what the schools are receiving. It's horrific. And the reality is that it's not the employees. It's not the employees at the school meals, it's what they get and what they have to manage and work with.
And what they have to work with.
So I think it's very important that we want to look at that, and hopefully the minister does that kind of intervention. I really appealing to him to look at that, because it's not, and he himself should have a look. I think he should tour the school meals and see what the children are receiving on an everyday basis, because I'm quite sure when he sees it, he will say, oh no, we can't have our Barbadian children having that. And as you said, it's probably the only meal that they will have. And so we have to ensure that this is done, and to include our farmers in such a way that our sweet potatoes, our children can eat the sweet potatoes, the cassava, the yam, the fish, all our indigenous food, so that they become familiar and they love what we have. So the child will say, I love sweet potatoes. How do you plant them? So that I can have them in my backyard and can have mommy and daddy prepare them for me. And I think this is how we teach persons, not by just theory, but by practice, which is very important to that as well.
Which goes back to what I was saying earlier, that every single school, primary and secondary, should have an agricultural program.
Absolutely.
They should, because not only can the school then become self-sufficient in terms of having nutritious food for the kids to eat and supplying the school meals with food, so that they can then in turn cook so that the children can have proper school meals at the secondary and primary school level. It's something that really needs to be done, and it needs to be mandated. It should be in every syllabus, starting from the primary school and coming up.
Quincy, you mentioned fish earlier. I know that we spoke about marijuana, we spoke about sweet potatoes and so on, but I wanted to turn, I know we have a lot of well, I know in St. James Central, in Paynes Bay, and so on, we have a fishing community, Prospect, and so on. And you have some in St. James North as well. Right. Now, you know, one of the things that happened this same time last year is that hundreds of boats were destroyed. And the DLP took the initiative to go and call all the fishermen together, sat with them, heard their concerns, and agitated the opposition leader.
In this very room, too.
In this very room, yes. Agitated for payment, not just of one payment. That went from one payment up to 3 payments. That was a DLP initiative at taking care of the fishermen. But, you know, having, and some people got money back. A lot of them still have not received money back. But one of the issues that they're having right now is that some of these boats are now back. and they cannot go out, not because the boats are not repaired, but because the government has not bought enough ice machines.
Yeah.
So there was a time when you go look at the board down in the market there, you would realize that only that there's a schedule and only 2 boats can be filled with ice, which means that even though a boat is able to go out, it cannot, because there's not enough ice being provided by this government. Now, the same donation that they gave to Rice the other day, buy 2 ice machines, man. Come on.
I think
You
the
know,
Prime
it's
Minister
not
has a
difficult.
charity now, so I think some of that money could be awarded to our fisher. But one, I think I went to a meeting, that same meeting that we had, and I think many Barbadians forgot that during the COVID pandemic, it was the fisher folk that gave mothers and farmers and families fish for free,
Yes.
so that they can sustain us during the time. And I think that's what we need to remember. During the pandemic, if we didn't learn anything, one of the things that we should have learned is that we need to be self-reliant and self-sustainable, because it was the only period of time that nothing was coming in, no shipment was coming in, but our farmers were there and our fisher folk were there. And that's what kept us alive during that period of time. And I believe that these are the things that we need to focus on. So while it is important, Comrade, as spokesperson for environmental intervention, while is it important that we speak about climate change and everything else that is related to climate change, and it's wonderful that we can have a climate change school, I think there's so much more that we can do to bring that kind of awareness into our indigenous industries, which have been farming, agriculture, and the fisheries industry. And I think that we have to applaud those persons that have been the backbone of every functioning developed societies. And if we take farming and agriculture seriously, like how other countries have done, subsidize the farmers, ensure that the farmers are able to produce a certain amount of quality and quantity at the same time, I think we can go far. But we have a lazy government, an incompetent government, and that includes a Minister of Agriculture that seems to be in absence, that is absent for the majority of the time, except when he's been attacked. These are the kinds of concerns that I think that really we have to bring at the forefront, that our Prime Minister, who speaks so much on climate change, does not see the value of having a strong agricultural sector that will be able to sustain for any kind of climatic change in our society. You can't speak about climate change and not speak about agriculture and not speak about the sustainability of our societies. I think that the two come hand in hand, and that's something we tend to miss out on quite a lot.
I agree with you. Recently, and I don't know if you all recognize it, is that on Sundays and Tuesdays, fast food restaurants are becoming the long lines.
It's cheaper.
Because it's
Sundays
cheaper.
and Tuesdays.
Yeah, Sundays and Tuesdays. Because Tuesdays, there's, I don't want to call it entity, they always got the $14 special. I mean, you get everything, drink, food, everything. And then the Sunday now, once a time used to be the Sunday food, where you could have gone and get macaroni pie, the whole spread at home by grandmother. Now we are going to the fast food. Now, my question is, we are talking about eating healthy, but yet eating healthy is very expensive.
It is, definitely.
And let us be real, the pockets are not as hefty as we were. So what are you going to choose? The fast food restaurant that you can get something for $13.50 quickly, or going to different supermarkets where a bag of potatoes at $13.50 alone.
Well, I'm glad that you, because it's a point I almost missed, and I'm glad you raised it again, because very recently I saw the manager of one of the supermarkets discussing the issue of their minimum wage. And the discussion is that because the government has implemented minimum wage, supermarket owners can no longer carry the weight, and it will be passed on to consumers, which means that even when you get an increase in your salary, the food prices will also be extended or increase. And so there's no balance. And so the question is that when you think about the government, and that's why I keep saying that this government is not people-centered, because while you were saying that you want to give them some kind of increase in their salaries and minimum wage, you're not taking in consideration the ripple effect that it would have on the society and the economy in and of itself. And it's not that we're saying we were against it, but look now, supermarket chains, will put the prices on the consumer. So that means we are the ones that will be paid out of the state money that we just got for the price for our wages. We will have to extend that in the supermarket. So my concern really is that the consumer and citizens, we're not getting a break at all from this government. Because every time they give you something, they knock you out with 3 others. And the taxes come in different ways. And I think that's and I believe that is what we need to really consider, that the government is not people's, it's not sensitive to those issues, because you're in government, you're a minister, so you don't have to go
That's
to the
because it doesn't
supermarket.
affect them.
No, it's not immediate.
With
They
their
don't-
salaries,
they
it
don't-
doesn't affect
no,
them.
and it's not immediate to them. So the average person like you and I, the poor people like you and I, that have to think about those increases and how do we manage the little income that we've had, and plus the taxes. Gas has increased, electricity has increased, water, because now you have the sewage tax. So when you think about it, your salary has not increased that much, perhaps by 2 or 5%. And then you have to pay out for all those increases. By the time you get to the supermarket, $100 will give you barely anything. So yes, if I have $100 at the end of the month, I might as well go at KFC and buy something for $20 just to sustain. It's not that I want to do it, but a lot of families do not have a choice. It's survival for them, and they just have to cope with the conditions that they have until the Democratic Labour Party steps in.
Gilding-Bourne, you have anything to say about that?
Well,
Eating healthy, it's expensive.
It really is. And I agree with Comrade Felicia, because, they're giving you with one hand and they're taking with the next. And it is unfortunate, but a lot of people, a lot of Barbadian households juggle bills. Well, this week I'm going to pay this one, or this month I'm going to pay this one. Well, I can't pay this one, but this one is more dear. This one is more pressing or urgent than the other one. And it's just the state of affairs that we're in. And if we produce our own foods, once upon a time they had a buy local program that used to go on. You used to hear about buying 100% Bajan, 100% Bajan, proper pork. We never used to import pork at one point in our history, pork or poultry. It used to be locally sourced. And we need to get back to that stage. Poultry farmers are farmers in general are calling for intervention, government intervention, effective, purposeful government intervention. Poultry farmers, what was it, last year? I thought the government said that they were going to do this project where they were going to incentivize small business farmers to put in cooling systems in their chicken pens. We haven't heard anything about that. We haven't heard whether it was successful. We haven't heard whether production for the chickens, for those farmers, have increased. And if it was successful, why aren't we replicating it? And if it was not successful, well, then what have we learned from that failure? And I just find that it is a complete repetition of failed initiatives, failed government projects, and a lack of data collection, lack of data analysis, so that the informed observer can do a critical analysis of what is happening. Everything seems so knee-jerking and reactive. The Barbados Labour Party is not a proactive government. It really isn't. And who's feeling it? The nation. The citizen.
I agree. Now we're here live on DLP TV. I invite you to like and share and let your friends know, pass on the link, so that we can share this definitely important and robust debate on food comes first and agriculture. Make sure like and what? Share. Right. So I'm going back to the students, and a student said, but let's give credit where it's due. Barbados has pioneers, our farmers, agro-processors, and backyard gardeners, showing us what is possible. Initiatives like the Grow Smart, Eat Smart campaign and Push for Community Gardens are a step in the right direction. But isolated efforts won't feed the nation. We need coordination. We need policy that protects producers. We need to make farming viable, not just a passion, but a profession.
Yeah.
So let's look at the aspect of the profession, the career in agriculture. Some people do not see I'm a farmer, they will look down at me versus
Say it's a hobby
say it's a hobby versus a
or
hobby.
just, you know.
How can we make farming look attractive or better yet, sexy in terms of it being a profession that people can look up to and say, I'm proud to be a farmer?
Well, one way I think we can attract the youth is to make sure we have new farming techniques. There's a lot of new technologies out there. There's a lot of new sciences out there that we can apply to the agricultural space. Our youth are very, very computer literate. That is where it is at. And that's one way that I think that we can do it. With just going back to the Black Belly Sheep project, one of the things government said that it was going to do was to swap information, share technologies between Guyana and Barbados with respect to the animal husbandry. Has that been done? If that has been done, what technologies have we gained? And if we have gained any technology or new knowledge, have we implemented that? Have we done any testing with respect to the inbreeding? Do we know whether or not inbreeding is still going on? All of these questions. So infusing technology into agriculture, I think that's one way that we can attract the youth. That's one way that we can attract the youth.
We have a gentleman in Barbados by the name of Dr. Chelston Rathfoot. I remember I was in Costa Rica once in my hotel room, and I saw this man, and I said, he looks like a Barbadian, and then he started to speak. It was, on NBC Telemundo, and he's speaking to the entire world about agriculture and about agrograms and using the technology and the automation of agriculture and so on. And I said, this guy, and then I realized, he said, oh, he's a Barbadian. Now he left the organization, he's back here in Barbados, and I'm wondering if we've ever stopped to engage Mr. Dr. Bradford in a level that he, or to really engage his capacity for agriculture. I think that we have what it takes. I think we have the knowledge, but I don't think that we have any intent and will. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on in Barbados, but I'm believing that people think that is okay to be second class. We don't have to have our agricultural programs as big as and as significant as Israel, right? And by the way, Israel has come to Barbados and offered suggestions in different techniques and so on,
and we haven't implemented any.
So we go back to the fact: somebody to wake up. It's time for people to wake up, because the same thing is happening in our crime circles, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. The same apathy and dropping of hands that's happening in the management of our crime is happening right here in agriculture. I don't know when somebody's going to wake up and say, let's engage all the technique, all the investment, all the money we put. Let's get going together, a coordinated, orchestrated attempt to put agriculture back on target.
Felicia?
This is quite interesting perspectives from both of our comrades. How do you get young persons, or how do you get anyone? We have a number of unemployed persons, not just the youth. We have persons that have changed professions, that have not seen agriculture as a sector. And I think it's historical as well, if we have to take it from that perspective, because historically we were the ones in the fields and not owning the plantations.
Yeah.
And so
there's a stigma, negative.
So not only that, it's a stereotype as well, that
Mhm.
this is what you'll do. You'll not earn much from it, and it's only persons that are uneducated that may be engaging in that field. And so the most important thing that you'd want to do is to educate them from very early, to change that stigma, change that stereotype. Look at agriculture in and of itself, the varieties or the different facets of professions in agriculture. So you're not just only a farmer, you can be a scientist in and of the field. And let's remember, Barbados has a very good and wealthy history of agriculture, being the first to identify and to do what's it
Sugarcane
called?
breeding.
The sugarcane breeding.
Sugarcane by seed.
When you do grafting of fruits as well. And so the science have been used, the traditional and indigenous science have been used in agriculture for Barbados. That has placed us on a global mark.
Yeah.
And I think if we teach that history, we teach that knowledge base within all sectors of society, not just in schools, but in the church. The church has its responsibility as well. We have church spaces. Why don't they grow food as well? Why don't you have small agricultural groups within the church, within the communities? And something that you have seen quite a lot in other societies, where if that part of their, say, one street or one avenue, we plant tomatoes, the other one we do carrots, and then we barter. These things do happen, but I think it's really a cultural that we have lost that sense of community, that sense of communal togetherness that we need to revisit, because as a people, agriculture has always been our basis. That when all else fails, we go back to agriculture. So yes, we can use the technology because the technology is important, but I think the indigenous knowledge of what we've had and where it can take us, because at every point in life, and I think I was telling my son that the longer you live, the longer you get to experience the world and see the world. So we may not be here in the next 30 years where agriculture may be in the air, what they're trying to do in the other planets now. I was watching a documentary where certain countries are looking to do I think is agriculture in the ocean, where they're testing to see what are the capabilities of these things happening. So we have to look at it, hydroponics in all different facets. So agriculture, not only in land, but what other environments that we can do and ensure that we produce the way that we should. So I think it's really about educating our populace, encouraging them. And agriculture is not only theoretical, but it also, there's a practical element. When children go to AgroFest, what do you think they go looking for? They go looking at the animals, they want to touch, they want to see. And I think that's something else that we need to look at. Having AgroFest shouldn't be a once in a year ordeal. It should be something, our experience, it should be something that is continuous. So every other 3 months, the Ministry of Agriculture could put on those activities.
Mini AgroFest.
Yes, AgroFest, so that people can come in, and children and persons, they can interact, farmers can exchange and have that kind of discussion and intervention. Persons within the different constituencies, because as a farmer, if you have your sweet potatoes, you want to make a sweet potato pie and you want to sell it, yes. So all of that, we don't look at those kinds of activities or intervention that can help. But also AgroFest, agro processing is something that we stay away from. We have all these mangoes, we have all these fruits. What do we do with them?
Sargassum seaweed.
And all
we
of
could
these,
we could do stuff with that.
But if we don't have a government like this, incompetent government that does not have the foresight, the vision to ensure that agriculture takes us in the next 30 to 50 years, then we'll still be stagnant where we are with the young persons, not allowing them to see beyond and how they themselves will be able to sustain their own generation. I think that's very important there.
That's why it's important to have an agricultural program in the primary schools. From nursery, primary, secondary, they need to have, and it needs to be mandatory. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that come. Not only will they be growing their own fruit, it grows character as well too. It plants the seed of inspiration in those children's head. That's the only way. Well, I can't say that's the only way, but that's one of the major ways that we're going to be able to make this whole agricultural sector turn around. And so that, because we have some farmers, and if you look at the majority of farmers in the agricultural industry right now, they're aging. I mean, yes, I'm a farmer myself, but a lot of the farmers are older generation farmers. A lot of the fishermen are older generation fishermen. Right? We need the youth to come in to take over these things. It's tantamount. It's
when you said something, Amoy, that really triggered my mind. We're talking about getting our children involved in farming and getting them involved in this whole thing. But you know what? When you ask yourself to what end, why agriculture? What are we really asking for?
We have to be able to be sustainable, feed
Sustainable.
ourselves.
You know what?
You know, the nation that can't feed
feed
itself.
itself? I can imagine if you park warships around Barbados for 6 weeks, you know, and you want to lose weight, everybody in Barbados will lose major amount of pounds because if no food can come in. You know, I stopped here and I thought,
Let's not put that in the air.
no, I don't want to put it here, but I just want to say that's our reality right now. If we import 85% of our things, but two things, the two groups of persons that came to mind as both we were speaking. We are talking about agriculture for feeding people, and you know that over 65% of Barbadians are over age 50. We're talking about not being able to feed our children, or a mother that is looking at her 3 or 5 or 6 children and saying, "How am I going to put food in these children's mouths tonight?" But they're the elderly whose kids are grown or would have left home or they're not around anymore, and there's not enough to supply their family's food, but they're not enough. There's not enough to supply the grandmothers and the grandfathers and the old people. So right now there are a lot of old people and elderly and aged in Barbados that are not eating properly, and so the reality and the realism regarding food is about how do we ensure that these important groups, the grannies and the babies, are also eating. This is something that should bug and not allow the government to sleep at night because those people are not able to eat food.
Well, the government is. We have, as I said before, and I will keep reiterating that we have a government that is not people-centered. And if you're not people-centered, then you do not take the needs of the persons at forehand. You do not make policies that will change or transform their lives and livelihoods. And when you ask that question in terms of how we eat, I think the important thing that when we say food comes first, we have to love food. As simple as it sounds, we have to love food and we have to love good food. And that's how I feel when I go
good food. I like that.
When I go to the market and I see the plantain, the nice plantain, and the pumpkin, and the golden apples. We have to love it, and we have to make our younger generation love it the way that we love it. There's nothing wrong with macaroni pie and all of these things, but we have to love our provisions. We have to love the things that have sustained the grandmothers and the generation. Because I remember even the plantain that some of us fry and everything else. We have fried plantain. There are people that make porridge out of fried plantain, which I didn't know until I came to Barbados, where I was taught how to make plantain. When I first had my son, they taught me how to make plantain porridge. And I think these are the kinds of diversity of food. And so it's not only that we can look at it in terms of just agriculture, but we can look at culinary arts in terms of how do we prepare the different types of food, the indigenous foods that we have, and also in terms of our livestock, how do we do that? And so it's very important that we look at those sectors and make it in a way that food becomes part of who we are, that we love. Yes, we love our pudding and sauce on a weekend, which is very different, because it was only when I came to Barbados I learned about the pudding, which is very different from St. Lucia. So all of those things, using sweet potatoes to make pudding. And I think there's the transitions and having that kind of alternative. So you don't just give somebody the cassava, but there are other ways of preparing it. And I think that's why I'm saying there are different sectors. What is the tourism industry doing for that? Using our local produce to create all of those imaginary culinary arts in and of itself. And I think that's very important.
I know you said tourism sector. Something else that we could also try to put on the table is agritourism.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of territories are marrying that together. I mean, tourists will come and pay to do a lot of different things. Farm tours. Some might even pay to go and pick, I don't know, cucumbers or melons or or Bajan cherries, stuff like that. So I was speaking to a farmer the day before, and she was telling me the boat came in recently, so she now has coconuts and stuff and that they bring in from St. Vincent. And I was like, coconuts? She was like, yeah, coconuts. And I was like, wow, okay, they're bringing in coconut. Well, I mean, where are we going to get the amount of coconuts that, would be needed to sustain the demand?
Plant your trees.
But we can plant coconuts. I mean, up Sunbury, a couple years ago, they had a whole heap of breadfruit trees.
The grafted
That
one.
yeah,
Short ones.
Half of them died.
yes, and they weren't of the yellow meat type either. They were the white meat, and the yellow meat is the sweeter version
Yeah.
and more sturdy in terms of against pests and so forth. But we could do these type of initiatives. It baffles me why, like for instance, we haven't taken our Bajan cherry and done more with it.
Oh, you love Bajan cherry.
The Bajan cherry, yeah, not only that, I love Bajan cherries, but the world loves Bajan
Yeah.
cherries. The vitamin C content in the Barbados Bajan cherry is higher than any other fruit that that the world has come across. Why haven't we capitalized on that? Stuff like that we could do.
Well, you know that
Marry the agriculture.
Carmita Fred is probably turning in her grave right now. When she was alive, she pushed breadfruit chips,
Yeah.
sweet potato chips. I mean, she was a hardcore DLP minister
Mhm.
that really campaigned for food security and so on in Barbados.
Mhm.
Now, why have we lost that passion? Doing lamb burgers,
Yeah.
and all these things. We even name the Barbados Agriculture Initiative, the stores that we have after her name, Carmita,
Yeah.
because that was her passion.
Yeah.
And she actually had radio programs. So that's how intentionally democratic the party was about agriculture.
Mhm.
There were radio programs that would have conversations with Barbadians on a weekly basis about how to grow, how to prepare different dishes, how to do this, how to do sweet bread,
Yeah.
But that's how seriously we took it. It meant something to us to get Barbadians back to the ground, growing stuff, eating breadfruit, eating sweet potato, eating plantain, golden apples, making golden apple juice. As a matter of fact, I think that's one thing that came from her. This is golden apple juice, using natural things to juice, right? So it is a comprehensive 333,000 feet approach to agriculture. The theft of products, the monkeys, the selection of crops, the seasonality, the planning, and then looking at how you make chips, how you export,
And diversification of the crops
hotel
too.
supplies.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that can be done to agriculture. And once the DLP gets back and we will sort this thing out once and for all.
Because I mean, gone are the days when the island solely depends on sugarcane. Because we have seen the virtual death of our sugarcane industry in real time right before our very eyes. And up to today, we still haven't gotten any closure with respect to what's going on with Coop Energy and the government. And everybody is pointing fingers and measuring appendices. But, they just need to get it done. I just need to get it done. I could say too much on the Coop Energy, but that would take for the whole night. But our sugarcane industry is in dire need of some rescuing.
There was
it really is.
subsidies, but they continue to give that industry subsidies.
Yeah.
Until last year.
Well,
millions of dollars.
As with every other project, there's a lack of accountability and transparency. We still don't know what's going on with the 1,100 shares that they bought for those persons from BAMC. We still don't know whether or not, the Portville trucks and the machinery and all of that is going to belong to Coop, or if the government is still going to retain those assets. There's a lot of more questions than we have answers. And it just seems like arrogance and attitudes are at the top of the line. Egos are at the top of the line while our sugarcane industry is being trampled. And, I keep saying it all the time, but when I was small, my mother used to carry us for drives in the country. And I used to love to see the cane arrows in the country. Yes. Hardly ever know.
It's beautiful, yeah.
Hardly ever know.
St. Joseph especially.
Yeah. And last month I went up by the sugarcane breeding station, and I had a good discussion with the guys out there. When I went there, they were outside and they were working. Guys took me showed me all the different breeds of sugarcane, how they've set out. He was very proud. He was very knowledgeable. And he was like, no, 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 come, Miss Gilding, come, Miss Gilding-Bourne, let me show you. And he was like, same thing Felicia was saying, we were the first country that realized and actually implemented growing sugarcane by seed.
And then pass it on to North Carolina.
Yeah, who has run with it, right? Who has run with it.
Yeah.
But one thing that stuck with me, I don't know if y'all have ever been up sugarcane breeding it. When it's up there, it's early morning and stuff. It's really, really beautiful.
I live there.
Okay. Yes, yes. It's really, really beautiful. One of the things they were lamenting about though, and he was like, Mrs. Gilding-Bourne, I want you to look out there and tell me what you see. And I was like, I ain't see enough sugar cane. He was like, okay then, where are we growing the sugar cane?
Yeah.
Where are we growing the sugar cane? But here we hear them talking about increased sugar cane yields and the sugar harvest is going to get, but we're not planting any more sugar cane.
Yeah.
And we need, less than 22% of the land surface in Barbados is used for agriculture. Less than 22%.
But
No, tell me.
It's the same thing that Comrade just said, and it's an interesting point that agriculture is on the land, it's the base. But we have a government that's keep flying in the air, so they will never understand what is
going on in the ground.
And I think it has been continuous. And I think that the majority of times when we think or even speak about agriculture, it's those little pockets of time where we have a shortage of flour, a shortage of chicken or milk or something. That is really the time that we take those matters seriously when there's a shortage. But I think it's important that we have to be more proactive, because if we're watching what is happening in the geopolitics of this world right now, we will have to be self-sufficient in terms of our own food security. And I think that's another challenge that we should put up to both the Prime Minister and the Minister responsible for agriculture. What does the data tells us about food security? How much will we need to sustain ourselves perhaps in the next 2 years or next year? There's no data to tell us what we actually need. Do we need more sweet potato? Do we need to plant more breadfruit trees? What do we need to sustain our country? Because we're hearing so much about climate change, but food security is part of climate change. And if you don't put the two together and you don't see how both are aligned with each other, then you really do not understand what climate change resilience is all about. It also means to sustain a society during the worst crisis, economic climatic crisis that it has. And if we are not able to do that, then it tells us quite a lot about the kinds of leadership that we have.
A reactive government.
The weather and don't think about how the weather will affect our resources, our natural resources.
I want to make a point.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm glad you're coming. I just want to come in here. And we are looking at climate change and the environment and stuff like that. But recently, the land mass, not only with housing, is now being occupied with solar panels as well as windmills. How do we balance it? We definitely need the solar panels in terms of energy, in terms of environment and for climate and stuff like that. We definitely need the windmills to produce the same energy. But the same windmills and the solar panels are on the land of agriculture. So the question is, how can we balance it by still maintaining agriculture, but still maintain our climate change resilience?
We need to stop using agricultural lands for non-agricultural projects. We need to, you mean to tell me you can find nowhere else to put solar panels? They got a myriad of government buildings, not giving you all ideas. But so what happened to the rooftops? What happened to the rooftops of these buildings? What happened to the rooftops up the airport? What happened to the rooftops up by the prison? Put some solar panels up there. But they're taking the agricultural land and doing some of everything except agriculture. And it's hurting us.
One of the concerns I have, and I was going to say earlier that we are pushing towards, we are trying to move away from fossil fuel. What's happening is that we're getting more solar because of that. But one of the challenges that we're having is that no one is looking far enough down the road. There was a time when people were drilling oil, And then somebody says, wait, this is destroying our earth. I believe that the same thing is going to happen with these windmills, solar panels, and so on. Why? There comes a time when you have a man-made solar panel or a lithium battery car. I don't want to call it a brand necessarily, but these all, you dig the earth up, you destroy the earth to get the lithium, you make your batteries, and you have a life cycle, a car that has a specific life cycle, which is like usually 10 years and so on. But there comes a time when you will have to destroy and dispose of the lithium. There comes a time when you have to dispose of the solar panel. And I don't know if we are running far enough ahead in time to determine what is going to happen. We are mining all of these minerals. We are making items, but these items, they have to be destroyed or disposed of. And I think there's going to be a collision between clean energy and sustainability of clean energy at some point in time. And I don't know if my personal belief is that the earth will never run out of oil. I don't think there's enough. I don't think we will ever run out of oil. But I think there needs to be a balance between clean energy and mining of oil. But at the end of the day, we cannot be using our agricultural land, our best agricultural land, for just for energy and disregarding food. Other countries interface agriculture with clean energy. So they have solar panels, but they leave enough spacing so that sheep can graze and eat and different things, and intersperse crops, different types of crops between it. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It is out there. Israel, as I said, has a myriad of examples of good agriculture, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to be focused, determine what we want to do, and go after it. And like something that the Democratic Party always does. I remember Barbados was known for this. He would always set his cabinet down, set some goals, and at the end of every year he would review those goals. Maybe we need to do the same thing for agriculture and for clean energy.
Well, we will.
Felicia, what do you think?
In terms of the solar panels and the windmills, I just think that
How do we balance it?
You can. I just think that those that have the land, and what you're seeing is that persons are buying off those lands under the pretext of agricultural land, and then they convert it to whatever they choose to do, put a couple of sheep, and you would still get a rebate for agriculture. But I think there are very innovative ways that you can do that. Just like what Comrade said. I mean, if you have a solar panel, you do not put it so low that the land is there, you put it high enough, and you can still grow some sweet potatoes in the land, because it's not really the land you need. You need the sunlight. So you do not need it to be so low that you can't grow. And why not in a way that you have it transformational in such a way that you can still have your solar panels, but still have an agricultural base. So whether the solar panels are being used for irrigation, so perhaps they can use farmers to do that solar panel initiative as well. So there's a number of areas, and I think the technical staff can provide that guidance, so we do not get that kind of influx of solar panels all across Barbados and not having the agricultural sector involved. We can use the solar panels, as I said before, for irrigations of land. We can use it for greenhouses. I did see a farming plant where they had the greenhouse and they had the solar panels above it. So these things are it's not that it's only performative, but I believe that it can work. There's feasibility in it. So what we're seeing, and I think I passed somewhere in Haynesville where I saw just solar panels very low. I think there's so much that can be done. So we need to be innovative in what we're doing so that it does not restrict, or we don't have to choose between the odds of what we can and cannot do, but allow it to work together. If we are going to look at renewable energy, let's use it with agricultural-based initiatives, so that we get the both worlds. Yes? Yeah.
Amoy?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with both Comrade Dujon and Comrade Gibson. I totally agree. We need to be able to strike a balance, and and I'm not even too sure if we have gotten the the capacitor or the wattage that was necessary that they said that to connect to the national grid. So a lot of people are still, you know, some homeowners, like they have their solar panels so that they're self-sufficient in terms of electricity, and then they can sell back any battery storage or electricity that's stored. But on a grander scale, I don't even think we have that capacity yet.
They're
I
not
mean,
allowing them on
they're
anymore.
not on the national grid.
Mhm.
So, you know, that puts a spoke in the wheel there. But with respect to using the agricultural lands to do this, I really, I just say point blank, do not use agricultural land for non-agricultural projects. That goes back to my point when I was talking about zoning, and make sure that we have zoning. We used to do it before. So I think that is something that we can think about reintroducing so that agricultural lands remain, I mean, they do it in the UK. Agricultural land remains agricultural land in ad infinitum.
So my question then for you,
Mhm.
what if we had to create a national food security strategic policy for our country?
It will have to start with the youth. Get into the primary schools, get into the secondary schools. We need an agricultural program. It needs to be on a syllabus. It needs to be talked about completely, repeatedly, by local program. We need to inject some nuance into what we're doing, without saying too much and giving away our ideas that we have planned. But definitely, under the Democratic Labour Party, agriculture will definitely change. It will definitely flourish and improve because we understand what is needed. We understand the nexus between water, food, and security. We understand the nexus between water, food, and the environment. And the fact that we need to strike a balance. We need to strike a balance and make it more affordable for persons to eat healthy. And the way we do that is to make sure that we grow our own food. You know, we have to be self-sufficient, especially in this type of economic temperature where we have certain actors within the United States and other places um, being rogue and doing what they like. Well, we've seen what's happened with the tariffs and all of that situation. We've seen what's happened with the eggs in North Carolina with the H1N1 bird flu that has it made it difficult to supply for supply chains to, you know, keep supplying. It's difficult to be able to source those type of eggs. We saw, what was it, last year, the Barbados government said that they were importing 600,000 layer eggs, and it would be ready for the public probably in 6 months because that's how long it takes. But what's become of that? So I don't know. We really need to make sure that we get these things and do them properly and not just haphazardly on a reactive, knee-jerking basis. There needs to be empirical data. We need to collect that data. We need to analyze that data and see where we are. As Comrade Dujon said a minute ago, we'd be able to see what it is we need to be able to make ourselves self-sufficient and sustainable and head in that direction with full steam ahead.
Felicia, if you had to implement national food security strategic policy in schools?
Well, not only in school, the first thing I'd do is get rid of this government because of their interest is not people-based, it's not people-centered.
Yeah.
Their policies tend to infringe primarily on the rights of citizens to be more flexible economically, socially, and even politically. And I believe one of the most important factors from the education background, I think what is important is not just including it in the curriculum, but to ensure that every Barbadian understands the necessity and importance of having a strong agricultural base in their societies and their communities. By now, every Barbadian should have at least a banana tree or breadfruit tree in the backyard, something that can sustain them in the event that we have a food crisis globally. And these are, I think, when you plant a banana tree, it will take 6 months. So you should, and those short-term crops are very important as well, because this is what sustained us during the pandemic. And I think this is what we have to do as a society. So education does not come only in terms of theory, but the practical element of it, how we are to sustain our society through practical initiatives. We have a Minister of Agriculture that does not understand the necessity of intervention on behalf of farmers. The funding allocation is very important.
Mhm.
The farmers need more tractors, they need more kinds of equipment, they need more technical skills and expertise and
Access to
intervention.
water.
Access, all of this would be part of it. But as I said before, if they do not have the data, they do not have the empirical evidence to show what the outlook looks like in the next 5 or 10 years, they will still be spinning in mud like what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
And they have our black sheep spinning in mud in Guyana as well.
Yeah.
So the reality is that we as a society need to realize that we need food to survive. It is innate as human beings. We need to love good food. We need to love our indigenous food, so
Mhm.
our children understand the difference between a white meat and a yellow meat breadfruit,
Yeah.
so that they know how to treat and create for their own families. I think if we start with families, we start with communities, and we go wider as a society, we'll understand that. And most importantly, when we think about the National Nutritious Policy, is that our ministries have to work in collaboration. So Ministry of Education, Ministry of Tourism, Agriculture, and even Commerce,
Mhm.
most importantly, and Energy, they have to work in collaboration to ensure that we sustain a viable society.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Paul?
Yeah, well, my focus, I will put my laser as the spokesman on environment on the area of agriculture in respect to water management.
Mhm.
I realized over the last couple of years, in the last 7 years, this Barbados Party government has filled in so many large water catchment areas with
Yeah.
stones and different things,
And a mall.
and building malls and different things, and you know, the farmers are saying, hey, you have the water there, either lower our water cost for agriculture, or give us this water that you're blocking up.
Yeah.
So there's obviously some disconnect between the reality of agriculture and supplying water. I also want to add here that our beaches and the whole fishery, I know that it's not directly on the agriculture, but fisheries is an area that I'm becoming increasingly concerned because of how we are doing all these groins in the water and destroying a lot of pots and reefs and this kind of thing. Right now, the people in Paynes Bay and Prospect
And Western.
but they particularly they're thinking of knocking off a beach, building a
Yes.
bar right in front of the last remaining open window
Window.
on the west coast by across from Jordan Supermarket.
Mhm.
And the people are saying, no, 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 this is the turtle nesting area. So even those natural things of turtles and fish and how it all interacts in the environment and water management specifically, I am saying the policies around water management need to be looked at,
Yeah.
and we need to stop destroying our water bases, clear the drains, make sure that the water is being captured into dams so that our farmers can have access to them.
But you made a good point there, because
Thank you,
Barbados
comrade.
definitely needs to ramp up its water resource management. I remember reading an article where Alex Eiffel, he is the manager of water resource management and environment at Barbados Water Authority, and he was saying that Barbados does not have enough water for large scale food production. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if he can say that, why can't this government understand that they need to do something about the lack of water access for farmers and the water scarcity? We are categorized as a water scarce society under the United Nations, and in the world, not just the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And you know, if we're thinking about food security, we have to think about water resource management, water harvesting technologies. Look at our neighboring territories and see how they have handled it. The Cayman Islands is one example. They've used cisterns, they've used different technologies to combat the scarcity of water in their country, and they've done it successfully. So we need to learn, and we need to do something more about it, because you know, without the water, the crops won't grow.
Now we're going to wrap up. I want you to, in 30 seconds, give your own personal feeling about food comes first, and appeal to whoever age group or entity, organization you want to go after right now. Who wants to go first? Paul, I think you should go first.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you,
30
lady.
seconds.
Thank you, Lee. 30 seconds. You know, Barbadians, I think that at this juncture of the in our country, we are at a crossroads where we need to certainly take a look at what is happening in your backyard, in your neck of the woods. There are taxes, there's high food costs, there is you know, hungry grandmothers and babies and so on. And I think a Democratic Labour Party government will restore to Barbados a life where people can eat, where the taxes on food are reduced, where there's access to water, and where people for the first time in a long time can actually have a good meal at a reasonable cost. It's not asking too much to pay attention to our children and to our grannies and to make sure that agriculture is taken care of adequately. The Democratic Labour Party will do that.
Felicia Dujon, 30 seconds.
Well, I'd just like to appeal to all Barbadians that the same way that we think about food first, food come first, I also believe that people come first. Our people need to understand the importance of food security in our society, and to particularly challenge the Minister of Agriculture, and ask him those fundamental questions. What is his plan, or what is his government's plan for the next 2 or 3 years if they are still in government? Because the reality is that our families are suffering in terms of food security. We see it not only at the local level, but on a national level as well. We're hoping that the national food policy or the national food nutritious policy will be revisited, including the school meals program menu will be revisited, because if we're seeing what is happening within the homes, it's also playing and displaying itself within the schools. And we're hoping that the minister responsible for education transformation, please, sir, take a look at their school meals policy and give the kind of intervention that is needed. The children need it. They desperately need it. Thank you.
Amoy.
Stop using agricultural land for non-agricultural projects. Please, I beg you. It is causing us continuous problems, and it will not get any better. It must stop. It must stop.
Thank you very much, panel, for coming on DLP TV as we look at Food Comes First. I'm calling all members of the Democratic Labour Party to come to the party's headquarters at the Democratic tomorrow, Wednesday, the 25th at 5:30 p.m. We're inviting everyone to come, and all members come out in your numbers to the headquarters tomorrow at 5:30, as well as annual conference is coming up on the 22nd to the 24th of August. We'd like to invite all y'all to come to the annual conference. I close by saying that a country that can't feed itself can't fully govern itself. If we want to be truly independent, economically, socially, or even spiritually, then we must treat food security like the national priority it is. It is time we shift from the dependency to dignity, from food imports to food producers, from food promises to real action. Because no matter your background, your parish, or your party, food comes first. And the Democratic Labour Party will provide that promise and will deliver. This is the DLP TV. I am your host, Quincy Jones, and the panel, Amoy Gilding-Bourne, spokesperson for agriculture, Mr. Paul Gibson, spokesperson for environment, and Ms. Felicia Dujon, spokesperson for education. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Yes.
Right there in your bed, you so destined. Often you were warned, you wouldn't take heed. You didn't see the need, negligent indeed. full of weed. Devil grass and lots of ants, affecting the lives of all them young plants. But if it's the quality that you want to read, then lots of interest you have to keep. You must work hard on your garden. Plants need much more than watering. You have to pay special attention to the changes that come with the season and to the soil condition. Cause when you plant potato, you will reap potato. That's what they mean when they say you reap whatever you sow. But you must pick up your fork and hoe, and you must use the right manure. Cause I say you reap whatever you grow. Die, die, yeah. Most of us are pleased to be just planters. Well, I think it is time we become farmers. Watch for crop raiders, check on them suckers. Care your plants from hatch to the consumers. You must put the fence around your garden. Stop all them stray dogs from entering, and all of them wildcats when they caterwauling. Cause all of your plants they are destroying. All seeds wouldn't fall on good ground. The rocks and the thorns will get some, and those that fall way, way out of line, you can save them if you catch them in time. This you must bear in mind. Cause when you plant potato, you will reap potato. That's what they mean when they say you reap whatever you sow. But you must pick up your fork and hoe, and you must use the right manure. Cause I say you reap whatever you grow. Die, die, yeah. Die, die, go. I know some of you really try your best, but still you're reaping limited success. No need to wonder, loss you must suffer when Mother Nature shows her power. Some plants are very perishable, and without care more vulnerable. But you must keep working hard, you cannot stop. You must get the best you can from your crop. Then you reap and put out on display. You get a good price market day. But if you can't handle the toiling, I think you should stay away from farming and do no planting. Cause when you plant potato,